Some stories shatter you before they even finish. This one was sent to me by a woman who thought she'd seen every kind of heartbreak until the day she discovered her husband's biggest secret wasn't an affair with a stranger. It was the child he'd hidden in plain sight, a little girl he'd brought into the world with her best friend. Imagine waking up every morning next to someone you trust with your life, only to realize he spent years building a life behind your back, and the person he shared it with, the woman you called your sister in every way but blood, the one who stood by your side at your wedding, the one who held your baby when she was born. Betrayal is cruel enough when it comes from an outsider, but when it comes from the people you loved most, it doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your sense of reality. This isn't just a story about infidelity, it's a story about survival, about a woman who lost everything she thought she knew, but found the courage to start over. Because sometimes the truth you never wanted is the truth that sets you free. Stay with me to the end, because what she did next will leave you questioning how you'd handle the same impossible choice. It started with an envelope I almost threw away. You know how some letters look like junk mail? This one did too, just a plain white envelope with no return address. But something about it made me pause. Maybe it was the neat handwriting spelling my name. Maybe it was the way my heart stuttered as I held it. I opened it slowly, never imagining it would break everything I believed about my life. Inside was a single photograph, my husband, James, sitting on a park bench with a little girl who looked too much like him to deny. She couldn't have been older than 6. They were laughing. He held her like a father would, close, protective. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked closer, searching for some explanation, but I didn't find one. Only questions. I flipped the photo over, hoping for a date or a clue. Instead, there was a sentence written in careful, slanted letters. You deserve to know the truth. My hands were trembling so hard I nearly dropped it. I sat down on the couch and tried to steady my thoughts. The room felt too bright, too quiet, like the world had shifted without warning. I had to know who sent it on. Why now? When James got home that evening, I couldn't look at him. Every word he said sounded rehearsed. Every smile felt borrowed. I tucked the envelope under a stack of magazines, telling myself I needed proof. Before confrontation, my mind kept replaying the image of the girl's small face, the curve of her cheek, the same dark eyes I woke up next to every morning. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake listening to his breathing, wondering how many lies were tangled between us. How long had he been hiding her? And what else was he capable of hiding? By sunrise, I'd made a decision. I was going to find out exactly who that child was, no matter what it cost me, because the not knowing was already worse than any truth. The next day, I called my best friend, Lily. She'd known James almost as long as I had. She was the only person I trusted to help me untangle this mess. When she answered, I tried to keep my voice calm. I told her I needed to see her. She said she'd be over in an hour. I didn't tell her why. Part of me was afraid to say it out loud. While I waited, I set the photo on the kitchen table, staring at it until the edges blurred with my tears. I didn't know that in just a few hours, I'd discover something even more devastating, because that little girl in the picture wasn't just James's secret, she was Lily's, too. Lily arrived with her hair pulled back and a worried look in her eyes. She took one look at me and knew something was wrong. I didn't waste time. I slid the photo across the table and watched her face drain of color. Her hands hovered over it, then dropped into her lap. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt thick enough to choke on. Finally, she whispered, "Where did you get this?" Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. I told her about the envelope, about the handwriting I didn't recognize. She kept shaking her head like she could make it disappear. I wanted to reach for her hand, but something held me back. Maybe I already knew, deep down, that she was part of this. "Do you know who she is?" I asked, my throat so tight it hurt to speak. She looked at me with tears shining in her eyes. That was when I understood she did know. She knew everything. She just couldn't bring herself to say it. I felt the world tilt under my feet, but I held on to the edge of the table. I needed her to tell me the truth. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "Her name is Emily," she said. "I've never meant for you to find out like this." My heart stuttered again, like it was trying to crawl out of my chest. Emily, a name that sounded so harmless, so innocent. But in that moment, it felt like a blade. "Lily, why didn't you tell me?" I was whispering too, as if saying it out loud would shatter whatever was left of our friendship. She covered her mouth with her hands, her shoulders shaking. I could see it, her guilt, her fear, the secrets she had carried alone for years, and I hated her for it, but part of me still loved her, too. I pressed her, needing every detail, needing the confession that would either break me or set me free. Lily looked up, and her eyes were the saddest I'd ever seen them. "I was afraid," she said, "afraid of losing everything, afraid you'd hate me." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm so sorry." I didn't answer her. I couldn't. My head was spinning, my thoughts splintering in 1,000 directions. There were too many questions I couldn't ask yet. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same between us again. Asterisk, asterisk, I don't know how long we sat there. Two women staring at each other across the kitchen table where we'd shared so many ordinary afternoons. Lily wiped her eyes and finally started to talk. Her voice was flat, like she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head. And maybe she had. "Emily is your husband's daughter," she said. The words landed between us like a grenade. Felt something inside me splinter, sharp and irreversible. My vision blurred, and I pressed my fingers to my temples. It didn't feel real. It couldn't be real. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Lily kept talking, filling the silence with truths I wasn't ready to hear. "It happened years ago," she whispered. "Before Emily was born. He was lonely. I was too." Every word felt like another betrayal, another twist of the knife. "You were my best friend," I managed to say, my voice shaking. "You were supposed to be my family." She closed her eyes, her shoulders slumping, as if she'd been waiting to hear that sentence. Maybe she had known all along there was no coming back from this. "I swear, I never meant to hurt you," she said. "I never meant for her to grow up without knowing you were her stepmother." The word stepmother tasted bitter on my tongue. All those years I'd watched Emily play in Lily's yard, never suspecting she was part of my own family, my own husband's secret. My mind flashed back to birthday parties, school recitals, little moments when he'd looked at Emily with something soft in his eyes. How had I been so blind? How many times had he lied, right to my face? The thought made my stomach lurch. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to run, but I sat perfectly still, because if I moved, I thought I might shatter. Lily reached for my hand across the table. Instinct made me pull away. I couldn't bear her touch. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "I'm sorry," she whispered again. But apologies couldn't stitch this wound closed. Nothing could. The damage was too deep. The trust was already dead. And in that moment, I realized something that chilled me even more than her confession. If she hadn't told me today, they would have carried this secret to their graves, and I would have lived my entire life not knowing the truth. Asterisk. After Lily left, the house felt too quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stood in the doorway, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing, but her voice kept replaying in my head, over and over, until it was all I could hear. I walked into the living room, where framed photos of our life lined the shelves. Smiling vacations, holiday dinners, all of it felt fake now. I picked up a picture of my husband holding our son as a baby. His eyes were crinkled in a laugh. He looked so proud, so innocent. And somewhere in those same years, he'd been with her, creating a child he never told me about. My stomach twisted. I set the photo back down carefully, as if dropping it might break something else inside me. I wondered how many times I'd sat across the table from him, asking about his day, never knowing he was hiding an entire person from me. How many excuses he'd made: late meetings, business trips, errands that took hours. I thought of Emily's face, so like Lily's, and wondered if he'd ever looked at her and felt guilt, or if he'd just buried it like a bone he hoped would never be dug up. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to scream every question I'd ever swallowed. But another part of me, the part that was tired, humiliated, just wanted to disappear, to crawl under the covers and pretend none of this had happened, that I hadn't spent 2 decades sleeping beside a stranger. I moved to the kitchen, needing something to do with my hands. I started washing dishes that were already clean, anything to stop my thoughts from circling the same dark drain. But it didn't help. Nothing did. The truth had rooted itself too deep to ignore. That night, he came home whistling, carrying takeout, like any other evening, like our whole world hadn't just cracked in half. When he kissed my cheek, I tasted the betrayal in his skin. And I knew then that I would never be able to unhear Lily's confession, no matter how much I wanted to. He asked me what was wrong. I almost told him right then, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just looked at him, really looked, and felt something in me turn to stone, because I realized this was only the beginning. Asterisk, asterisk, I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, counting every reason I'd stayed with him all these years. Love, duty, habit, fear, they blurred together until I couldn't tell them apart anymore. At dawn, I decided I couldn't carry this secret alone. Another day. He deserved to look me in the eyes and see what he'd done. When he came downstairs, still sleepy, still pretending nothing was wrong, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the photo of Emily in my hands. He looked at it, then at me. For a split second, I saw a flicker of recognition, guilt, but he masked it so fast I almost missed it. Almost. Who is she? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He opened his mouth, but no words came out, just silence. Heavy, choking silence that told me everything I needed to know. My hands trembled as I set the picture down between us. Lily told me the truth about you, about her, about your daughter. His face drained of color. He sat down slowly, like his legs wouldn't hold him. It was a mistake, he whispered. A long time ago. I thought it would never come back. The words sounded small, pathetic, like a child trying to explain away a broken window. But this wasn't glass. This was our life. A mistake, I repeated. My voice cracked. You call an entire child a mistake? He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. And that, more than anything, broke me. Because even now, he couldn't own it, couldn't say her name, couldn't acknowledge what he'd done. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel the chaos he'd unleashed inside me. But I didn't. I just sat there, letting the silence expand until it felt bigger than the kitchen itself. He started to cry, then quiet, hopeless tears. And I realized he wasn't the man I thought he was. Maybe he never had been. All the years, all the trust, all the dreams, weighed against a secret he'd chosen to keep. And in that moment, I knew I could never look at him the same way again, no matter how much he begged me to try. Asterisk, asterisk, the days after our confrontation were a blur. He tried everything: flowers, apologies, whispered promises in the dark, but none of it mattered. The truth had hollowed me out in a way I couldn't explain. Every time he touched my hand, I felt the ghost of his betrayal clinging to my skin. I couldn't wash it off. People always say time heals. But what if time just gives you more space to replay the memories over and over? I kept seeing Emily's face, the way her eyes looked just like his. I wondered if she knew, if Lily had ever slipped and let the truth out, or if she thought her father was just some nameless man who disappeared. Either way, she deserved more. Then secrecy. At night, I'd sit by the window with a cup of cold tea, listening to the clock tick. It felt like my whole life had been measured in those tiny sounds, counting down to this moment I never saw coming. I'd built everything around the idea that we were honest, that we were a team. But he'd been living a separate life right under my nose. The worst part wasn't even the affair itself. It was how he looked at me now, like he was terrified I'd leave, as if he only remembered my value when he realized I might walk away. I hated that. Hated feeling like a consolation prize. Hated that he'd stolen my right to choose what kind of woman I wanted to be. One morning, as he packed a suitcase to stay with his brother, he asked me if there was any chance to fix what was broken. I almost said yes, out of habit, out of fear. But then I thought of Emily again. I thought of all the nights he'd held me and lied with that same voice. And I knew the answer was no. I don't know what happens next. I told him honestly, but it's not going to be this. He closed the suitcase and didn't argue. For the first time in years, he respected a boundary I'd set. And somehow, that hurt more than if he'd fought to stay. When he left, the house felt too big, too empty. But it was the first time in forever that the air didn't feel poisoned by secrets. I took a deep breath and promised myself I wouldn't fill that emptiness with regret. The first week alone was the hardest. I thought I'd feel free, relieved. But the quiet pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I kept expecting his keys to rattle in the lock, his voice to call out from the hallway. Instead, there was only my heartbeat and the sound of my own thoughts. Loud as thunder, I started sorting through old boxers in the attic. looking for something, anything to remind me who I was before all this. Buried under baby clothes and faded birthday cards, I found a journal I'd kept in college. The girl in those pages was fierce, hopeful, unafraid to take risks. She had dreams that had nothing to do with a man. Reading her words felt like meeting an old friend I'd abandoned. Some nights, I'd catch myself wondering if he was thinking of me, if he regretted it all as much as I did. But I forced myself not to pick up the phone. I knew if I let him back in too soon, I'd lose every inch of ground I'd fought for. And this time, I wasn't going to let love make me small. It was Emily I thought of most. A little girl with a future built on a lie. I knew eventually she'd learn the truth, and it broke my heart to imagine how that would feel. No child should carry the burden of their parents' choices. But I also knew I couldn't fix everything. Some wounds had to heal without me. During those long hours, I started to write. At first it was just a way to fill the silence, but soon it became something more, a record of what had happened, of who I was becoming. Each page felt like a tiny rebellion against the part of me that still wanted to pretend it hadn't happened. By the end of the month, I'd filled an entire notebook. When I read it back, I didn't recognize the woman in the first chapters. She was so afraid of being alone, so desperate to be enough for a man who'd already chosen someone else. But the last pages were different, stronger, clearer. I closed the journal one night and realized I didn't need him to validate my worth anymore. I didn't need anyone to. And for the first time in a long time, that thought didn't make me feel sad. It made me feel powerful. Asterisk, asterisk. 2 months later, an envelope arrived without a return address. My hands trembled when I opened it, because I knew before I saw the handwriting who it was from. Inside was a single sheet of paper. His words were messy, almost desperate. Like he'd been afraid he wouldn't finish before losing his nerve. He wrote that he hadn't planned for any of it to happen. That meeting, Emily's mother again, after so many years, had stirred something in him he couldn't explain. He claimed he'd never stopped loving me, even as he built this other life in secret. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, I didn't either. I just kept reading. He said he was sorry for every lie, every stolen moment, every silent betrayal. He asked me to forgive him, not because he deserved it, but because he knew I'd never have peace if I kept carrying the weight of his choices. There was a time when I would have clung to those words like a lifeline. That time was over. At the bottom, he added a line about Emily. He said he wanted her to know the truth someday, but didn't have the courage to tell her himself. He asked me to promise I'd be kind to her, that I wouldn't punish her for his mistakes. It was the only part of the letter that didn't feel selfish, and it was the only part I respected. I folded the paper neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it away in the back of my dresser. Not because I planned to answer it, because I needed proof for myself that it had been real, that I hadn't imagined it all, that even the most devastating truths sometimes come wrapped in half-hearted apologies. That night, I lit a candle and sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker in the darkness. My mind replayed every moment of our life together, but it felt like I was remembering someone else's story. Someone I didn't know anymore. Someone I no longer wanted to be. I whispered into the empty room, "I forgive you. But I'll never forget." And as I spoke those words, I felt the last tie between us snap. The relief was so complete, it brought tears to my eyes. But this time, they weren't for him, they were for me. A week later, my phone rang in the middle of the afternoon. It was his number. For a moment, I almost didn't pick up, but something inside me needed to hear his voice one last time to close this chapter with no unfinished words between us. When I answered, there was only silence on the line, then a ragged breath. He said my name like it hurt to speak it. He sounded older, defeated. He told me he'd moved out of Emily's mother's house, that he was living alone in a small apartment on the edge of town. His voice cracked when he admitted he didn't know who he was anymore. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He asked if I hated him. The question hung in the air, heavy with the kind of guilt that has nowhere left to hide. I thought about all the nights I'd waited up, all the times I'd defended him to my own doubts. I thought about the girl who had trusted too easily, and the woman who finally learned not to. "No," I said quietly, "I don't hate you, but I don't love you either." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear him breathing, trying to swallow whatever emotion was clawing up his throat. When he finally spoke again, his words were almost a whisper. "You deserved better." And for the first time, I believed him. because I'd finally proven it to myself. He asked if we could ever be friends, if maybe, one day, we could look back without bitterness. I told him the truth, I didn't know. Healing had its own timeline, and I wasn't going to rush it for his comfort. He said he understood. Maybe he really did. Or maybe he just needed to believe he'd left me with something other than regret. We said goodbye without any promises, without any plans to see each other again. It wasn't dramatic or tearful. It was quiet. I ended the call and sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like half of a story. I felt whole. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. The light through the window made everything look softer, more possible. And in that moment, I knew the past had finally loosened its hold on me. Whatever came next, I was ready. In the months that followed, I learned how to live on my own terms. I repainted the bedroom, replacing every trace of the life we shared. I put fresh flowers by the window, just because they made me smile. The house felt different, lighter, warmer, like it finally belonged to me, and no one else. I started therapy. At first it was just a place to unload everything I'd been carrying, but little by little, it became the space where I rediscovered the parts of myself I'd buried under compromise. My therapist asked me once what I wanted most. It was such a simple question, but for the first time, I had an answer. Peace. Emily wrote me a letter, a real, handwritten letter. She apologized for everything, her lies, her silence, her part in the secret. She said she never meant to hurt me, but she knew that didn't matter now. She ended by wishing me happiness, even if she'd been the reason I had to search for it. I read her words and felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of it. My daughter grew stronger every day. She learned to crawl, then to stand, then to walk, all while I was learning to trust my instincts. Each milestone reminded me I was still building something beautiful, even after everything fell apart. She became my daily proof that I hadn't lost everything I'd just started over. One evening, I sat on the porch with my journal open in my lap. The sunset painted the sky in soft pink and orange, and I felt an unexpected gratitude, not for the betrayal, but for the way it had forced me to wake up, to choose myself, to stop settling for a love that was only ever frail. People say time heals all wounds. I don't think that's true. I think time gives you the distance to see the wound differently, to stop letting it define you, to realize you survived at 10. That survival is its own kind of triumph. I closed my journal, knowing I'd finally reached the last page of that story. If you've stayed with me through every word of this, thank you. Maybe you've been hurt like I was. Maybe you're still searching for your own ending. I hope you know that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about reclaiming your life, one choice at a time. And I promise there's life after betrayal. Asterisk, if you've stayed until the end. I want you to remember this. Sometimes the people we trust with our hearts are the same ones who teach us how strong we really are. She never asked for this pain. She never imagined her world would come undone at the hands of the two people she trusted most. But when it did, she chose to stand up instead of fall apart. Maybe you've been there, too, staring at the wreckage of a life you thought was safe, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again. Let this story remind you. You are not defined by the secrets others keep or the betrayals they deliver. You are defined by how you rise. She chose to walk away, to protect her own peace, to show her children that no lie is bigger than the love and strength she carries inside. And in doing so, she became more than a wife scorned. She became a survivor. Did this story move you? Please subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next chapter. Give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a reminder that betrayal is not the end, it's the beginning of something new. And if you have a story of your own, a story of heartbreak, resilience, or redemptions, send it to me. I'm Brenda. And here, your voice matters. Because in our next story, you'll meet a woman who discovered her husband's second family on the day of his funeral. You won't want to miss what happened next.